Hello and welcome to tonight's webinar series. We're so glad you can all join us again. Tonight is week 3 of our 4-week series. My name is Nicole Zamora. I'm the Director of Community Outreach with Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services. I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items with us. Should you have any questions, the easiest thing to do is to just raise that little hand. There's a little icon. There's also a chat feature, and I'll monitor those throughout the evening. Beth will be taking her questions at the end, but if you have something and you don't want to forget about it, just write it down in the chat, raise your hand. Everyone should have received an email yesterday with links to the videos of week 1, which was Erica Caldwell speaking about hospice. Week 2, Dustin McFarland speaking about how do you plan your estate for seniors. And then, of course, tonight we have Beth, who we'll get to in just a second. So thank you. Thanks for all joining us. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Jerry Delcourt, the CEO of Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services of the Diocese of Sacramento.
Thanks, Nicole. Welcome, everybody. I hope you have had a chance to join us for our first 2 sessions. They've both been interesting, to say the least, and informative. Tonight, we have Beth Noseworthy. She's Executive Director of Live Well at Home. She's going to be talking about when is the right time for help at home. It's a great topic and title, and I think it's going to be even better as we get into the nitty-gritty. Just to give you a quick background, Beth has worked in the non-medical in-home home care for over 3 years. And what she shared is that she has actually lived through this herself with her parents. So as you may remember, when Erica Caldwell spoke to us, she also had that first-hand experience, and nothing can replace that part of it, because that really brings it home. Prior to that, Beth worked 33 years. I'm not sure she wants me to say the number of years in the staffing industry. So lots of experience, and probably will explain how this sort of ties into what she's currently doing. She's going to bring up some great topics. One is, how do you know when it's time to start investigating care options for your loved one? And for any of us who've been through this, it's certainly a hard question when we're wrestling with, the parent who doesn't want to discuss it, and you need to discuss it. A second topic is, how will my aging family member be protected from COVID while using non-medical in-home care? Again, very topical for today. So without further ado, Beth Noseworthy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. As he said, I'm Beth Noseworthy, Executive Director of Live Well at Home, and I wanted to thank you for letting me talk to you about the subject that is very near and dear to my heart, both professionally and personally, as Jerry said. And at the end of this, I want to make sure that as you walk away, that you all are experts. So you'll be way ahead of where I was when I started this path with my father. So if you will, let me share a bit about the personal side of all of this. So I started looking for a community for my dad the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. I really, at that time, only thought I really loved my grandmother, but I soon realized that I really enjoyed going to these communities and meeting all the marketers and the residents, and coming from staffing and sales. I thought I could do this. Now, my dad, he wasn't so impressed because, of course, he thought he wasn't old. Although he had been diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia in 2012 and probably had it for about 4 years prior, he was living in Ohio, ended up in the hospital, and realized he needed to be in an independent living community. So my sister and I, from Dallas and California, flew up, sold his home, moved him, got him all settled. And I know I'm making it sound really easy, but it wasn't. I lost about 10 pounds during this whole thing. But I realized pretty quickly when he was in independent living that he was going to need eyes on. Primary progressive aphasia affects the speaking part of your brain, and so his communication skills weren't so great. So it was the first time I had engaged non-medical in-home care to come in the morning to make sure He got his breakfast, got up. I knew he was still alive. And then somebody to come in at the end of the day, you know, to make sure that he was home, had had dinner, and just to spend some time with him and be a companion. And of course, you know, keep him safe. So I thought all was good until all of a sudden he decided he wanted to move to California. Like the first week he was living in the independent living. So I had to deal with all of that, trudge back up there and move him to California. So with that, I moved him into independent living, assisted living up the street from my house, where I there also engaged non-medical in-home care, kind of a one-on-one companion to be with him, to go on walks with him, activities, just kind of hang out with him. Since then, he had to move into memory care. He's been there for about 2 years now. And I also have continued that care. It was 5 days a week, and now we're down to 2, just to have somebody engage him in his food and activities. And it's also peace of mind for me to know that my dad has some extra eyes there, because you always, no matter where your parent is, you need to be an advocate for your parents. So, but I got into this business through all of this, and it's funny because Erica, who spoke the first webinar, she is one of the people that kind of sent me in this direction also. But I thought to myself, if I could just help one adult child get through this and know, you know, the information that I know now, that would make me happy. So that's what I did. So California is the most populated state with seniors. And the other interesting part is that 1 out of 10 seniors want to live in a community. The other 95% want to live at home. So with that said, and as the baby boomers retire, and age, there's definitely going to be more of a need for home care, communities, and definitely maybe some other new ideas to assist them with aging independently. Over the last few decades, as the baby boom generation matured, the long-term care system has done some changing. They've moved away from nursing homes and into the preferred settings of, like I said, in-home care and communities. But 52% of people age 65 and older will require some form of long-term care. So it really shows how important getting an understanding of what we need to do for ourselves, and then of course our loved ones that we're dealing with now. And then the other thing is, with the increase in dementia, Alzheimer's, that is going to put a lot more focus on how we help those dementia, Alzheimer patients age in their home independently. So this the picture that we have is so different now. Older adults are very passionate about how they age, and they see retirement as a new opportunity and not a withdrawal from what defined them prior. So with older adults wanting to stay in their home, we really need to look at what that looks like. So most of our homes are 2-story homes. They're in urban neighborhoods. Our families are all over the place. And the older adult does not always know, as Jerry said, what is good for them. I always say if I could tweak that little independent bone in some of our clients and spouses, I would feel better about how they're aging in place. Sometimes they are so adamant that they don't need help. But sometimes we really have to get someone to stick their toe in just a little bit and try 3 days a week of care, just to see how they can utilize it to keep them happy and to enjoy their life more. So isolation, which we can all understand ourselves now with COVID, is definitely a big issue. And according to a new report by the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard, the problem of social isolation has become alarming. And thanks to the generation's inclination to age in place, especially in the suburbs, as I stated in the last slide. Also, there's evidence that social ties improve health for older people. There was a recent study by the AARP Public Policy Institute and Harvard and Stanford universities that estimate that isolation among adults is going to cost Medicare an additional $6.7 billion a year. So we can understand aging in place and then the isolation issue, which I definitely know all of you probably see situations with your loved ones. I know my mother's in Dallas in independent living and can't really go anywhere. And I think this is weighing on her a slight bit. So I make sure that I reach out every day. It's super important for all of us to do that. So all of us worry, of course, about our loved ones and their care, but here are 6 reasons to age at home. Safety. People are very aware of their own surroundings, the home that they've lived in. Independence. They feel very comfortable with what they can and can't do. It's very comfortable. They have their favorite chair in their favorite room. And in some cases, they are close to their family and friends. They also know how much it's going to cost to live in that home each month, each year. And of course, it's very, very convenient because it's something that they are very familiar with. But each situation is very different. And these 6 reasons could also be reasons for you to go to a community. It's just each situation is very, very different. So, how do you know when to start care? It starts with signs, and it can start with signs that are very small. Your family member or loved one could look disheveled or not groomed, and maybe that was something that was super important to them. And now all of a sudden they've lost interest. They are missing doctor's appointments or maybe even going a week early like my father used to do. And like we said, they are isolated and you can tell that that's affecting them, and you know that some companionship would work well. They can't complete the tasks that they used to do. Maybe they like to garden, maybe they like to do puzzles, maybe they could, you know, pay their bills, write their checks, and all of a sudden, for some reason, they can't do that. This is something we see a lot. There's expired food in the refrigerator. They have lost track of time and have no idea when they bought that hamburger. They repeat the same questions and they repeat the same stories. I see that a lot with my mom. Pretty much every single night we have a conversation about knitting, which has been the same conversations we've had every day before. And then they're losing weight. They've lost interest in food, or they're not cooking healthy meals. They're going through drive-through. I recently did an assessment with a couple where she used to do all the cooking and now she wasn't able. So they were taking drives every day and picking up food at Taco Bell and at Kentucky Fried Chicken and Carl's Jr. And that was their way of having meals, which of course, based on any kind of chronic illness or disease, that's not really the way to go. Then there's the denial on the loved one's part, where we either live far away or there's no way this could be happening to our parents or our spouse. And sometimes we wait until it's past the point of being able to take care of those individuals in their own home. So again, we've talked about resistance. Jerry stated that. We find that a lot with spouses where, say, it's the wife who needs the care and she's adamant that she can do everything and take care of the home. And based on that, the husband is, you know, happy wife, happy life. And it gets them into situations that could end up in a very bad way. Then there's a spouse taking care of a loved one, or maybe an adult child. And that's very stressful if you're balancing your own family, balancing a job. So perfect time, like what I've done, to engage an in-home caregiver. Hospice, we definitely collaborate with hospice to allow the family members to enjoy the time with their loved one. We kind of work in tandem with hospice and the family as a person goes through that process. And then if you see a change in condition of your family member, maybe they have heart disease and they become more short of breath, something like that, it's a great time to start non-medical in-home care. So 5 reasons to bring in help early. The first one, which we deal with every day, is consistency. The sooner you get in-home care company engaged, the sooner you can work through the different caregivers and find a match that works well with your parent. And then getting ahead of the game, this person can watch and report changes in the needs of your family member. And then, of course, independence. We've been talking about that all the way through this presentation. They can, the caregiver can provide that without the family's help, which I think is important. And then loneliness, that isolation. The caregiver is kind of a built-in friend, confidant, companion, helper. And then, you know, if we're not around, that certainly helps with the loneliness. And then we've got a ton of people out there that are fall risk. With that caregiver there, that really can help with the prevention with those eyes on. And I think, again, one of the most important things is you, the adult child, the spouse, you remain the family member, the son, the daughter, and you don't have to be doing personal care and those types of things with your family member. So just to kind of back up, to define non-medical in-home care, because there also is medical support, which would be your home health, your physical therapy, your occupational therapy, speech therapy, wound care, those types of things. So for example, non-medical, what we provide is we can remind somebody to take their heart medications at noon, but we cannot sort them out into the MediSet for them. That would be something that the family would have to do or get it set up through a pharmacy to be sent. But non-medical care can be short-term, long-term, and again, it's super focused on keeping people independent and safe. So where can the care be provided? So it can be provided pretty much anywhere you call home. So we can look at an apartment, your home, your family's home, skilled nursing, rehab, hospital. We do sitter service, making sure people are safe because there's not enough staff to be able to focus individually on each person who's at those communities. And then just like my family members, independent assisted memory care communities, those are the types of places. But also we have provided in-home care in a transitional type setting in a hotel room. And then also we've even escorted a grandfather to his granddaughter's weddings. So that was something super special to be part of. So what kind of care can be provided? That's probably one of the questions we get asked most when we get our inquiry calls. So like housekeeping, not heavy duty housekeeping, but straightening up, wiping down counters, straightening shelves, straightening closets, changing beds, those types of things. Companionship, which I've talked about, going and doing the grocery shopping, taking people shopping, transportation to doctor's offices, meal prep, which is super important. Even if people have short hour shifts, like 4 hours, we can meal prep for the whole rest of the day. We can make lasagna, do things for the whole week. We can set it up in the refrigerator with little notes, how high they need to heat it in the oven, whatever the situation is. And then overnight shifts. Maybe it's a situation where the individual is with the family during the day, but at night they get up a lot, they can't sleep well. So we do overnight shifts. It's awake shifts. And while you're sleeping and resting up for the next day to be fresh for your loved one, we can be there to assist them to the restroom and those types of things. Personal care, transferring from a bed to a wheelchair to their favorite comfy chair, into a car, and then the medication reminders, which I did talk about already. And then we also assist families with individuals who have Alzheimer's and dementia. That way it allows the family member to go out and do things while we're there and give them a break. And then the best way to choose a non-medical in-home care provider, I'd have to say the two top ways are referrals. Ask your friends, ask your family, ask your neighbors. And then, of course, there's the internet. We get lots of family members, all different ages, who are surfing the internet looking for different in-home care companies. Most of them have done a lot of research, and so definitely come with a lot of questions. Doctors, they often refer somebody to in-home care based on the home situation or what their disease might be, kind of what their day-to-day needs are. And then the local Alzheimer's Association chapter, they've got tons of information on their website, and they do have listings of in-home care companies. And then lastly, the elder care locator, you call that number and they put somebody on the phone with you to kind of talk through what your needs are. Then it comes to what kind of provider to choose. Should you go with a private caregiver or an agency? Either way, you want to make sure you have a list of what your care needs are and understand what their minimums are. And then, of course, you're going to reach out, call to inquire what exactly they do, all the types of things that I just went through. And the in-home care company will come out to meet with you and your family member. Now with COVID, we're doing some of it over the phone, but we definitely have to have eyes on before we send somebody out to the home. But during that assessment, we get all sorts of information. It could be, what did your family member do for work? Did they travel? Do they speak foreign languages? Do they like to knit? And then, of course, all the medical information. What kind of chronic diseases do they have? Now, it's super important. Did they have a COVID test recently? All those types of things that will help us find the most perfect caregiver that we can for the individual who needs the care. So as far as the agency, all caregivers now, I'd say for about the past 4 or 5 years, all caregivers through an agency have to be part of the Home Care Aid Registry, which is part of the Department of Social Services. They renew their registry every 2 years. It's $35. Each agency that they are part of, they have to go through I'd say probably 5, 6, 7 hour orientation. There are 3 basic things that they go over: reporting adult senior abuse, and then emergency preparedness, and then most of the other is kind of working through how to work with that agency, and then these days really focusing, I'd say, at least an hour of time on dementia. Then they all have to go through a live scan, which is fingerprinting, and then LiveWell does an extra background check. They have to have a current TB test, valid driver's license, and then of course experience in being a caregiver professionally, not just that they worked with Auntie Lou as she aged, but somebody who has professionally been a caregiver for at least a year. And then along with all of this, the Department of Social Services does come out and audit us to make sure that we're compliant and that we have all the paperwork for each of our caregivers. And we also have to have a license, and that gets renewed every 2 years also, the agency does. So private caregiver versus agency caregiver. I'm going to go into this just a little bit. So I think some of the things that are super important to ask are quality. So at home, who has the skills and the reliability and quality to understand what caregivers need to be? If it's a family member or if it's somebody that you got referred to, how do we know that they have the skills? And that's something that we do every day, and that's what we do in orientations. We check, can they transfer? We go through how to thicken liquids, those types of things. And I think most importantly too is backup. So if the family member can't come, so now you've got to leave work hypothetically and you've got to come in. So, that can kind of cause some issues. Then performance. Let's say it's somebody you've been working with or it's a family member and all of a sudden things aren't going so well. Are you really going to feel comfortable managing that caregiver and their performance? And then insurance. Who's legally responsible if a caregiver gets sick or is injured, especially with COVID these days? And then communication. This is something I think is of the utmost importance. How do you know if you're living far away, what exactly is going on with your loved one? What kind of documentation is being done? Where is that being saved? So, so some things to think about. So the next two slides are just kind of a comparison, most specifically between the private caregiver and the agency. We already kind of talked about cost and responsibility and kind of what happens with the family and the agency, the screening, the caregiver quality, and then caregiver performance. And I think, focusing on the backup, because we certainly don't want situations where somebody needs 24-hour care, they can't be out of somebody's sight, and all of a sudden that caregiver can't come. When you are working with an agency, I'd say there's about a 98% reliability that they're going to be able to fill that shift, unless it's in the middle of the night. But we have been able to do that, but it is a little bit more difficult because the caregivers aren't sitting there waiting for us to call them. And then the caregiver phone support. We have 24/7 support for our caregivers and 24/7 support for our family members and clients. So if a need arises, especially during COVID right now, those things kind of come up. People are symptomatic, and kind of what the protocols need to be once that is decided. So again, just a little bit more around that. PPE was super important, still is, but back in March and April when people couldn't find it anywhere, we thankfully were able to get lots of PPE and continue to be able to do that. We also, every 3 weeks, deliver it out to our clients because it's a requirement for our caregivers. We also have an app where all of our care plans, once we've done the inquiry, are documented. And there are also digital care notes after every single visit, and also a picture and bio of the caregiver that's coming out to see your family member. And again, like I said, the 24/7 phone support for the care recipient and the family. So I know this was brought up and kind of what we're doing to protect our clients and their families and the caregivers during COVID. So we've put, and these are things that you need to make sure that all agencies are doing. Not all agencies have the capability to do all of the things that we've put in place. So we've enhanced our safety protocols. Our caregivers check in on an app. They take their temperature, go through the questions that we all go through, like when we go to the doctor's office. And then at the end of the shift, they check out saying if there's any change in condition, is the client symptomatic, and then also kind of doing an inventory on the PPE so we make sure that everything's okay. We also have just started providing enhanced PPE packages, so if somebody does become symptomatic, they've got all of the requirements with the N95 and those types of things. Also with the app, we've been able to do a lot of infection control training with how to put on an N95 mask, making sure it's fitted properly, also a surgical mask and gloves, and then all of the different infection control. But all of that's on their app, and the availability for the training videos are right there. And then again, the 24/7 management for urgent situations, which thankfully we haven't really had but one of those where there's been a suspected COVID case. And of course, if the caregivers, when they check in, have a fever or are symptomatic, whether it's COVID or not, we pull them from the shifts, and then we work very quickly to restaff those shifts. So there's a huge focus for any of our clients that are in communities. We only provide, that caregiver can only work with that client because we don't want them then going out to other homes and things like that. So we really have got a lot of steps where we used to be able to turn care around within 24 hours or 24-hour notice. It does take a little bit longer to kind of rearrange schedules so we make sure that the exposure is very limited. So affordability is also a big question because, of course, that's something that when we're doing an inquiry, people want to know what our minimums are, what we do, and of course, what the cost is. So I think you really need to look at these 4 key factors: the type of care that's needed, the client's health, the amount of care needed, and where you live. Some agencies charge different rates for different needs, or sometimes it's a flat fee based on hours. So you kind of need to know the type of care transferring, for example. Is it a low transfer, high transfer? How much help do they need? Client's health. How does their health affect their day-to-day? Is it chronic? The amount of care, again, is it 2 hours, 4 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours? Do they need standby assist or a Hoyer lift because they're a heavy transfer? And then where are they located? You'd think all of this would be simple, but it's not. You get out into the more kind of suburban neighborhoods, caregivers don't live in those neighborhoods, so it can be a little problematic to go to, say, El Dorado Hills or Rockland, Lincoln, those types of places. So really understanding kind of what those costs are and evaluating, you know, kind of what you can spend. So 70% of people turning 65 can expect to use some type of long-term care. So many older people, and these are a lot of the chronic conditions that we go through during our assessment, because not only are we there for whatever the situation is, maybe a hip replacement and they're coming home, but you know, understanding, are they diabetic? So what can we feed them? Alzheimer's, cancer. Do we need to watch out for depression, high blood pressure? And then again, what kind of care is going to fit your budget? Is a family caregiver going to fit your budget, or IHSS, which you can be allotted hours that are paid for through the Department of Social Services. Then agencies, you can take your family member to an adult day healthcare, like staycation, maybe a church, some sort of faith-based community resource. And of course, there's long-term care and then VA benefits that can help a lot. So the average cost of 24-hour in-home care has doubled to over $20,000 a month over the last 6 years. So it does make it sometimes a stretch to be able to do that. And, we try to work with people because maybe somebody does need 24-hour care. Maybe they only need 12-hour care. So where can the family supplement, or a friend, or, where can we plug in? So we can all be pretty creative working on that. But the average cost per hour based on hours, the type of care, is it a heavy transfer, kind of range anywhere from 28 to 35 plus an hour. Back in 2015, we lost the sleep exemption, which allowed caregivers, we didn't have to pay the overtime, which now we do. So that has definitely kind of made things a little expensive also. And then understanding who's going to pay for that care. I kind of touched base a little bit on that already, but so Medicare only will pay for home health, the physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, the types of things I talked about before, which are prescribed by your doctor, and then they pay for hospice. And then non-medical home care is paid for privately, long-term care insurance, life insurance, VA, like I said. And then people have also been creative with home equity loans or utilizing reverse mortgages. So again, it's not something that can't be done. You just have to work with your agency to understand kind of what makes sense. And then I did a little comparison about in-home care and then assisted living, for example. So as I said, if you were doing 24-hour care, it can be about 20,000 plus a month. Where when you look at assisted living, it can be anywhere from 5,000 to 9,000. So what I try to say to people is you have to look at what the needs are. How safe is their home? And again, do you have long-term care that can help offset that 24-hour care? Because at some point in time, I'd say probably if you're doing, I don't know, say 30, 35 hours a week of care, or 12 hours during the day, that it sometimes makes a little bit of sense to move into assisted living or memory care. Just for the cost sake of everything. In the end, I have to say though, when you think through all of this and you think about your loved ones and yourself as we all age, it's all about being independent as long as you can in your home and making sure that you're safe and that you're comfortable. Because again, not always are your loved ones going to want to have this care, but sometimes it's just explaining how important these things are, that they don't end up in the hospital or in some other situation. So with that, does anybody have any questions? We can go to those.
Hello, everyone. So now is your chance to ask any questions. All you have to do is hit unmute. I can help unmute you as well, or you can put it in the chat. Oh, it looks like we have a question. How do you manage the situation of someone when their health changes or declines over time?
So I will take that question from the perspective of in-home care. And I would say that, as I stated in the slide, starting earlier, so a caregiver can be engaged to watch that change in care. So you could start with 12 hours, and then we need to increase it to more hours. There's always that chance, of course, in losing the caregiver, based on kind of hours changes. But most of the time when there's that relationship, people are able to make those changes. But as care or health declines, care can increase. And we've had situations where people have been on hospice for months, and we've had a whole care team, caregivers. And when the individual has passed, it's even been great. The families have invited them to their memorial services. So it's definitely something we do all the time. We will come out and do a reassessment to assess the situation if somebody's gone to the hospital or they had a fall and had to have a hip replacement. So we're pretty flexible and can make those changes fairly easily.
Thank you, Beth. Any other questions? You can raise your hand if you're having problems unmuting, and I'll unmute you. I did something here called unmute, so hopefully you can speak.
Maybe I've just explained it so well.
It looks like it.
Hopefully they're all experts in in-home care, non-medical
Right.
in-home care.
Steve, I know you always have lovely, insightful questions for us. Do you have any questions this evening? I think you answered everyone. It looks like they're not raising their hands.
Well, I have to say that my team, I kind of went through all the questions that we get asked during an inquiry and an assessment. So I tried to make sure I covered all of them. And hopefully with these slides, when they get sent out, everybody will be prepared when they have to take care of their loved one and bring in-home care.
Well, you definitely went into a lot of detail. I like the way that you explained the difference between, some people I think get confused, right? Like, is it medical? Like, can you give me, why can't you give mom those pills? I don't understand,
Yeah.
And so I think that's really helpful in helping to lay that out, of course, right? The costs are there, and that's because that's the cost of doing business in the state, right?
Yeah.
The cost of paying employees and things like that. Oh, it looks like Robert has a question. So let's see if I can unmute you. So, okay, Robert, it looks like I tried to unmute you. I can see your hand is up. It says that all you have to do, Robert, is press the little microphone. If not, I will take it in the form of a chat. Hopefully he can do that. Sometimes.
I'll put our little info up here.
Yeah. So Beth is leaving her information on the screen as well. Robert, if you do still have that question, just go ahead and put it in the chat. Oh, Steve, I see you have a question. So Steve, if you could do me a favor, there's a microphone that you guys have. It says that I have unmuted everybody and I'm giving attendees full audio control. So now it just means that you guys have to, there you go, Steve. You should be able to speak now.
Okay, so this is Beth. Thanks for your presentation. I just had kind of a curious, silly question. You said for somebody to be hired by your organization, they absolutely have to have 1 year of experience as a caregiver. Just curious, like, how does somebody with no experience ever start in the industry then?
Yeah, no, that's a super great question. So we, a couple years ago, created a Caregiver Academy just exactly for that reason. And it was a week-long class. They were in the training room, present, I think 3 days out of that week, and then they did online training. And we we're successful with like 2 people who were able to complete everything and move forward. But I agree with you, Steve. It is definitely, I mean, it's a problem in a lot of coming from staffing, you know, regular clerical, light industrial. It is a problem for people to try and get that experience. But I think more and more there are agencies out there that are creating those types of academies and looking at those individuals to try and, you know, get them as a professional caregiver.
So are you saying that's a hiring requirement for your particular organization or across the industry?
I would say, I can't speak for every single agency, but I'd say in most cases, people are looking for that experience professionally, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, for the question. I thought someone had chatted with me that maybe there was another question, but it looks like, oh, Mary Louise has a question. So let's see if I can help her. Okay, Mary Louise, it says that I have unmuted you. Oh, there you go. Now you can speak.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I've observed many neighbors and family members, and I think one of the things that is most important is being able to begin the conversations early because I think the individual needs to be respected irrespective of their age and of their medical condition. So what strategies do you recommend for that, Beth?
For starting the conversation?
And for really finding out, and if there was a way to know if this is the personality type, if this is my parent or my loved one's life experiences, how could I help direct them if they're not being forthcoming with me?
Yeah, I mean, we have that happen all the time, where families know that their, you know, loved one needs to have in-home care. And sometimes they engage us to come speak with them and, you know, go through the assessment. And sometimes we can show a demo of our app so they can kind of see what the caregivers look like and kind of some of the things that they do. And sometimes that helps because we're not the family member. And we can tell them all of our, you know, stories that have been successful where we've had long-term relationships with, you know, between the client and the caregiver. I will say I have a situation where one of our adult daughters has a father and a mother who the mother definitely needs care, but she won't take it. And the father won't go against her, and the daughter is respecting the father. So, I mean, in that situation, there's really nothing anybody can do. Unfortunately, that could turn into a situation where, you know, something happens. And, you know, like anything, you want to make sure that we take care of it before something happens. But sometimes, and that's where we get a lot of calls, is something's happened and now it's a fire drill because they tried to talk about it and they couldn't. But I think it's, I mean, different example, but when I wanted to get my father to move to California or move into a community in Ohio, I had him come here and I had already gone out and visited all of them. So I took him around to look at them. And that's kind of where we started our conversation about care and him being far away. And then it was fairly easy to get him engaged in in-home care when he was in Ohio, because I think at that time he understood what his need was. So, I mean, I just think every case is so different, but we get involved in those a lot, and I think help a lot.
So we have 2 more questions. Oh, so sorry. Mary Louise, go ahead.
Thank you. And I also wanted to mention that I had picked up these cards that we've been playing from the cemetery.
Oh, perfect.
The
So
Talk
Beth,
of a Lifetime.
yes. So what she's talking about, Beth, is we in part of the gift basket that everyone got is they got Talk of a Lifetime cards, which help you start the conversation. There's other cards out there too, something about like Take 5 or something like that. But these ones we use a lot, Mary Louise, for the same thing, right? How do we start this conversation, whether about any of these end of life services? Right. That's why this webinar series was so very important. So Mary Louise, thank you for sharing that you're using it. It is helpful, right? It seems awkward at first. Sometimes people are like, wait, you want to talk about what? But if you kind of get them to talk about other things, then it's pretty good. Kathy, I see you're finally unmuted, so I'm going to let you ask a question, and then I have a question that came in via email, so I will ask that one after. Go ahead, Kathy.
What do you recommend for someone who needs periodic care? Perhaps not 24-hour care, perhaps not even 8-hour care, but care, periodically throughout the day. Is that even a possibility?
Yes. So, for example, our minimum is 4 hours a day, 3 days a week. So minimum would be 12 hours a week. We see people or agencies who have minimums of 20 hours a week. And then we have seen before COVID where there were like 2-hour check-ins. You could do a 2-hour check-in in the morning, 2-hour check-in in the evening. So, I mean, it really kind of spans, the gamut. And you really just have to call around. I will state, though, that a lot of the minimums are based on the caregiver population and the shortage of caregivers, which the question prior about, training people to be a caregiver who don't have experience, how important that is at this point. So a lot of those hour minimums are based on just being able to get consistency and getting caregivers to commit to those lesser hours. Does that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Great question. Okay, the question that came via email. Any recommendation on how to have the conversation with the family member who has long-term care insurance but doesn't want to use it because they think they will need it later?
Oh, yeah, we've had those before too. I think if they are not the person also who doesn't think they need care, if they understand that they need the care, and you go through the pricing of the care and see, their care will go so much further with that long-term care insurance. I mean, most of them have a 90-day elimination period anyway. Not all of them, but most of them. But I think if there's somebody who money's important to them, I think really kind of doing the math and putting it down on paper, and showing them kind of also how much they're spending each month to have that long-term care, because I'm sure the last thing you want is them not to use it, and they pass before they even get to use the long-term care. So, but I do understand it is difficult sometimes.
Well, thank you, Jerry. I think you're going to come back online. So while we're waiting for Jerry to come back, again, I thank you everyone for asking questions tonight. And here's Jerry.
Hey, Beth, I want to say thank you on behalf of CFCS. You gave great information, a tremendous amount for everybody to really think about, and some really thought-provoking questions. There's no easy answer to when, is there?
Not really.
Yeah.
It just depends on the people.
Yeah. For everyone who's on the call, I hope you enjoyed it as well. As you heard, a deck of her presentation will be going out to each of you as a reference. You saw Beth's contact information is on the screen, and you'll be able to use that should you have additional questions. So Beth, once again, thank you. As we wrap up, this was week 3. Next week is week 4, and it's why should you make your final wishes known? It's actually a panel discussion and a Q&A that I'm going to be hosting. We'll have some experienced members from our staff who work with families on a daily basis. Hopefully you can join us for that. So we look forward to seeing you next Thursday, 6 p.m. Same time, same channel. Good night, everybody. And thank you again, Beth.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.